and I'll never back down. In the middle of the ring is where I lay the smack down. Against all odds, I will always prevail. So when you step to me, it's like hell in a cell.
You want to punish people for actually liking professional wrestling? Guys like Colt Cabana, guys like Luke Gallows? Huh? You will apologize to me for them because they can't be here right now and they can't stand up to you and they can't let their voice be heard. I am CM Punk and I am the voice of the voiceless, and you will apologize and you will like it.
I apologize, you son of a bitch!
Ooh, alright guys, Delzinski here. What a week it has been. It's We Talk Wednesday, and core blimey, we have literally had a hell of a week when it comes to WWE and wrestling news. And I'm going to introduce the man, the professor, to you guys right now because we got so much to talk about on this show this week. It is crazy. CM Punk, Vince McMahon, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and all things in between. Weeds, the professor, how you doing, mate?
Did I miss something this week? Has there been something happened? I haven't had any internet for about a week.
What?
Has something happened?
Are you mad?
It feels like something big's happened this week.
No, nothing at all. Ryback's just been injuring people left, right, and centre.
Table botch. Lots of things going on left, right, and centre, like you say this week. And word of the week's got to be what? Podcast. I mean, everyone's had something to say on the topic that is CM Punk. Vince has got involved. You've got Jericho flying around. You've got Austin floating around. As I say, I mentioned Ryback. Maybe Ryback's going to have a podcast at some point. He's just playing with wrestling figures, from what I can see on Twitter.
Oh, that's just rude, isn't it?
I
mean, yeah, guys, it has been one hell of a week in the wrestling industry and some explosive podcasts. First of all, we had CM Punk on Colt Cabana's podcast talking about his issues with the WWE, why he left. Then we had Vince McMahon, not as such responding to CM Punk. He was on a podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had a lot to talk about, and Austin really didn't hold back with the questions. And today we're going to review it all, and we've got some of your tweets as well to talk about throughout the show. So you guys have been tweeting me today, yesterday, with some of your views on what's gone down with Punk and Vince. So I'll be reading them out at different points during the show. And yeah, wow. I mean, Weeds, where do you want to start this week? Where do you want to kick off from with the Punk and Vince issues that have been going down?
Now, we spoke about this, I think, about 5-6 months ago, and we swore that we would never cover CM Punk again. However, if you have not heard our first views, I'm sure Mr. Delzinski has got a link he can put in the description of that first We Talk special on CM Punk. And a lot of the questions and things we were asking there are finally what has been resolved to some degree by one party. There was loads of things that we brought up that we speculated at the time, whether it was injuries, whether it was pay, whether it was creative, whether it was just, he didn't want to do this anymore. And if you get a chance, listen to that We Talk. It's well worth doing. And it seems like it was a little bit of everything. But the one place I want to start with, I think, today, because it got brought up quite a lot during the Colt Cabana podcast last week, are the injuries themselves. And there's a lot of, not just the injuries that Punk sustained necessarily to his body and his knee, elbow, all these other kind of things, but in the other thing is he was quite critical, I suppose, of the WWE, their medical team and the wellness policy to some degree, and what it actually takes to get through that. He talked particularly about a staph infection, whichever one it's called. So that's kind of where I'd like to start. What did you think about all the injuries and the things that he said?
Well, this was a side of Punk that I completely kind of agreed with in terms of that he needed some time off, because I think over that period of time when he was looking banged up, you could kind of see it physically. I think there was times where me and you had spoke before and I'd said, Punk don't look in that great shape. And that maybe falls back to some of the issues that he was talking about, because he said that he actually was in so much pain at the time that he was struggling to actually physically train. I think he had problems with his ribs as well, in addition to that infection that he had. And it sounds like from his view, that the doctors just were so inadequate and didn't do their job. But the trouble is we'll never know the other side, and how bad was it really. I don't know how they could refuse to really give him treatment after he's asked for it time after time. And what it sounded like the biggest excuse was well, you got to wrestle tonight, and well, you got to get in the ring tonight, so we're not going to treat you. And I think Punk kind of narrowed it down to that he thought the doctors were lazy. And I don't quite know. Do you think that's true?
Well, I suppose the best way to look at it is to look at all the different things that happened to him. The most telling thing for me during that podcast, when he was talking about the injuries and how he wanted to be perceived, is he felt as the champion, which he was for the 434 days, that he needed to set that example. And he mentioned one superstar. Well, I'm not going to call him superstar. One wrestler in particular that he thought he should model himself around, and that was Harley Race. Now, Harley Race was a tough son of a bitch. You did not fuck with Harley, and he would work through injuries. So there's a degree, if you were going to be a wrestler, you have to work through injuries. Now, what we said on the previous podcast that we did, or the We Talk, was that period after WrestleMania, where he just wrestled The Undertaker, and he disappeared off TV for a little while, and then came back. I think he missed one pay-per-view, the Extreme Rules one, where I think it was Cena and Lesnar, might have been Cena and Lesnar. And then he came back and fought Jericho. And we said at the time that we did not feel that was enough time for him to have off. I think it was about 6 or 7 weeks. And when he talks about the things that were wrong with him, there was no way that 6 and 7 weeks was going to do it. I think at the time we said we don't expect to see him probably to Survivor Series, SummerSlam earliest, and he showed up. I think well before that. As I said, I think he only missed one pay-per-view. So the things he talked about the knee. And if you've ever injured your knee, I mean, I've had various things happen to mine, and it is bloody painful. They don't go back to normal quickly, and there's only so much you can do rehab-wise, or you're just going to irritate it, and it's going to flare up, and it's going to lead on to other things. So if your knee is messed up and you've got to have it cleared out, you've got to leave these things time to heal. And I think that's a lot of what you were saying, maybe a little bit earlier, is that it felt time and time again when he was talking like he was pressured into coming back too early. And I think the elbow was another example. And he said he looked forward to surgery just so he could have some time off. But knowing, having watched wrestling for quite a number of years now, we know guys work through injuries all the time and they come back regularly. But there was different things I took from it, and at times I think Punk likes to say that he questions things, and he does that quite a lot, and he questions the doctors and things like that we come on to. But if it was me, and I know I'm more or less I'm your champion or I'm one of the top guys, I wouldn't be that concerned about saying, look, fuck it, I need the time off. If you want me to come back and be fresh and not just let these things and these niggles and these major things build up, so to the point where I am going to go, do you know what, you don't care about me because you just keep asking me to go through this wall. So I think there was probably an argument for both sides, one for Punk to actually say, whoa, I know you want me back, but I can't physically do this. And on the other hand, I get that there's WWE who are going, yeah, we've had wrestlers who have had more things wrong with them than you've currently got, maybe. And when you're working, because that's the life, isn't it?
Well, what you say, and that very last sentence was what I was going to throw at you, because you said there that we've had other wrestlers that have had, maybe bigger injuries or maybe wanted more time off. And a good example, I would probably say, at the similar around the same time was when John Cena wanted time off as well. I think
Perfect example.
I think it was coming off of the Brock Lesnar match, wasn't it? The first one.
Yeah,
Extreme Rules, and he was in a very similar scenario where we thought he was going to be away for a considerable amount of time, and then all of a sudden it was no, Cena is not going to have time off, and Cena again, another one that was sort of talking about niggling injuries left, right, and centre, and I think it all kind of focuses back on the same thing, that they were looking out for the interest, maybe not of Punk, maybe not of Cena, but again, the actual, they look at that roster and, you know, it's threadbare, and these were the guys that sold for their company. So in terms of a business sense, they were looking at that side of things. And yes, that is where probably you'd side with Punk and say, well, okay, you might be thinking about the money, you might be thinking about the business, but at the same time, you've got to protect those assets. And were WWE protecting the likes of Punk and Cena at the time? And I think a question that we got as well from one of our tweets was from Smack Talks, our good old buddy who joined us last week. And he said, you know, his question that he's put to us is, would superstars benefit with maybe 1 to 2 months off per year to recover? Because he thinks it'd be worthwhile, and it would give the roster a bit better refreshment, so to speak. Because it probably would, to be honest. I think it would help, and it would enable them to manage the roster a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, and you've always got the thing that you got guys coming back. I would say, arguably, just playing devil's advocate a bit, there's a number of your top guys. And again, we'll probably come on to those that don't show up. But even your top ones who do get their time down to some degree. I'm thinking at the moment Randy Orton, who's disappeared for what has been about 6 weeks or five weeks off TV at the moment because he's off shooting a movie. Now, whether shooting a movie counts as time down, I'm sure compared to the schedule they work, that probably is time down. To people like me and you, shooting a movie would be probably one of the hardest things we've ever done. But no, I completely take that point. And I think just to keep, you know, these guys fresh, and coming back from, you know, and maybe having just a month or just one pay-per-view and one run up to that off would benefit them. And again, you look forward, you can work more angles, and you can have these guys coming out of nowhere, coming back into storylines. I think what you said with the roster being threadbare is probably spot on at the moment. It is. You've only got to have a look since they launched the network of how many wrestlers, the lower card guys, have been cut to see that there's not a lot there but below the surface. There's a bunny, but there's not not a lot else under the surface. So no, in principle, I think if we were going back and we were talking like between 98 to 2002, when it was the Monday Night Wars, and it was just about to get that time where you're going to shift the rosters together, that would have been the time for me to say, you know, you're going to have a couple of months off. Go and do whatever you need to do, sort yourself out. If you need to get your surgeries, have your surgeries now, and then come back, and then we have this program ready for you. And I think the way we'll probably talk about booking again in a minute. So no, that's kind of, I completely take that point. And I think we've particularly, we've mentioned that about Punk before, that he was a guy that prided himself, and he says this in the podcast, of trying to match John Cena. Not necessarily just John Cena, but he thought it was his example to set. And he mentioned John Cena in particular. He's going to basically said, anything that John Cena can do, I can fucking do too. And John Cena's got that reputation, hasn't he, of coming back from injuries very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Like, he tears his bicep. They say you're going to be out for 4 months. He's back in 2. So maybe it's just an extension of that. Is that for me, Punk was never going to be that. That guy. I don't think he needed to be the face of the locker room, but I suppose in one sense he made himself that, because he did tag himself as the best in the world. I suppose a bit like Bret Hart did back in the early 90s.
Yeah, and at the same time, he did call himself the voice of the voiceless. Whether or not, now that's something that probably we'll touch on throughout the show, but whether or not he really was the voice of the voiceless, because he indicates a lot that he did speak up for others, and he talked about how he was willing to put over others all the time. But I mean, again, it's how you perceive that with everything that's gone down now, whether or not you think that's true or not. And it is very difficult to really decide who's right or who's wrong. And I was meant to mention this at the beginning of the show, but I think it's quite good to point out as well that these are just our opinions of everything that we've heard over this week. So, I mean, you know, we're not right, we're not wrong, but nor are you guys out there. And we want all your views. And like I say, Smack Talk sent us a tweet today asking us our views on that specific point. And we've got plenty more tweets. And it's just great to you know, it's really, I think it's almost brought the wrestling community to together to really have a massive talk and debate about this topic.
No, definitely. I mean, if you want a shining example of what I suppose Punk means to the last, where are we going back to, 3 or 4 years of wrestling, Punk is the reason I watch wrestling again now. I had a hiatus from about 2006 or 7 to 2011, where I'd only watched the Rumble, Mania, SummerSlam and Survivor Series. And it was the infamous now, I suppose, because it turns out he hates the word pipe bomb now, that got me back into watching this, because this was like the Attitude Era kind of stuff. What is going to happen? He's fucked off with the belt, and it was a great story. So I suppose we've covered injuries to quite a lot of extent, and yeah, we I think we both get that side of what CM Punk was saying, and just to put a disclaimer like we just did there, Punk is the reason. I'm not going to speak for Delzinski, but that he is the reason I got back into wrestling, and I suppose that leads us naturally on to a lot of the other questions we were asking, in particular about the creative direction of WWE. I mean, what are your feelings on that? How much of a part do you think it played into how he thought he was being booked? Because listening to the podcast, and I don't know if he just sounds like he hates wrestling now. He's not overly interested in. He wasn't interested in working with anyone or doing anything.
Well, this is the bit where I sort of differ a bit, I reckon, to you and many others, because the injury bit I completely understand, and I'm pretty much on his side when it comes to that. After he told the story about, you know, coming close to death and all sorts of things like that, I got it. I mean, he didn't have to say much more about that. But when it comes to the whole booking side of things, in terms of the industry itself and where it's going, the whole bringing back of the old guys, I don't necessarily agree with it. I still believe that WWE at some point has to make a decision to take a hit, not bring back these older guys, and just let the young talent go. Now, when I say let them go, that means let them main event, big pay-per-views, and let's see how they get on. Whether or not it sells the biggest, whether or not it's the best pay-per-view in the world, that doesn't matter. That has to be done for these new guys to actually become the superstars that these legends that come back are today. That's the biggest issue with the industry. And I think that that's where Punk was seeing things from. And I agree with that bit. The bit I don't agree with Punk is, and I'm just going to say straight away, I never ever agreed that The Rock should have gone over CM Punk, ever. That was such a dumb decision. Whoever booked that, well, you should be fired, because that was just dumb. Yeah,
Vince.
Most likely, yes. But that was dumb. But the other bit I don't like about Punk in terms of his commentary and what he said on Colt Cabana show, he's very, as per usual, very quite negative. Not so much to like a Batista, but very negative towards the older sort of generation in terms of people like The Rock. And although he may not like that decision, I don't know if there's even a thought or a hint or a spot of respect that comes into it. Triple H, obviously a massive talking point in the issues that Punk has had. Respect there? No, I definitely don't think so. And I think regardless or not, you need to have a bit of respect. In terms of him saying that he never, ever, ever wants to wrestle again, he despises the industry. Think about the fans as well, I would say, when it comes to things like that. The fans still back you. A lot of them are pro-punkers. That's my new saying, #pro-punkers. But a lot of people out there still back him. From a wrestling perspective, they believed in what he was saying, a voice of the voiceless, I come to. But those people, do you not feel, and this is asking everybody out there, do you not feel a little bit disrespected when he turns around and he says he despises the industry? Because you're part of that. That is the bit that kind of gets to me a little bit. He didn't once say on Colt Cabana's podcast, he did say that he loves his fans, but he never really elaborated much on that. And then he did get into some sort of arguments with Cabana about how people disrespect him when he's out in public. But a lot of people rise above that and don't even need to go into those sort of things. A lot of people would just not mention them.
I mean, I think the things we're probably going to talk about before we get onto the creative is just this perception, I suppose, of CM Punk in the public eye. Because when he did go off...
he went off.
Off on someone on Twitter or wherever it may be. He went off in a major way. He would F and blind, and he would call them all sorts of things that we're not even probably going to utter on this show. And yeah, I mean, I would imagine a lot of these fans, like he was talking about, were rude, just in his face, like you. I mean, the infamous comment I think he said on the podcast was, you didn't buy my house, I bought my motherfucking house. I would imagine a majority of the fans, someone like me, just because I bought a couple of CM Punk t-shirts, a majority of the fans, I don't think I bought him his house. Do you know what I mean? I think when he did react, he always reacted to the ones who were very much in his face, and I think, I'm not saying he was right to react in the way he does, because on the other hand, he's not just a human being, in the sense that he's a role model, and he talked about the young children in the front row who are part of the WWE show, and that's where I disagree with his stance. But then I suppose the other hand of that is that you're not going to have young children really following you on Twitter who are going to be mortally offended by what he's saying. But equally, he was a role model and still is. But equally, I wouldn't tolerate rude people, but I'd probably not deal with it maybe in public in the way that he did at times.
So is he doing a good job of being a role model then? Because when you say, I get that, I totally get that, but when you swear back at people on social media, no, I mean, when do you ever look at any other wrestler that does that? You'll probably able to pick out a couple that respond.
I'm sure Batista told someone to fuck off, but I think that was on the WWE.
But the big ones, the top level, don't do it.
Yeah, that's where I don't agree. And with him, I can understand why it would frustrate him. I'm sure it frustrates every one of them. And he made his career, didn't he, on speaking his mind?
Yeah.
And at times, yeah, as much as if someone was in my face and, was insulting me while I'm out with my wife or my girlfriend, not that I have a wife and a girlfriend, they couldn't be one and the same person.
You have both?
AJ Lee was for Punk. But do you know what I mean? There are times when you do cross the line, and I think it was he was telling us a story on the podcast of how he was looking for change. He was just trying to buy a hot dog. And at times, at times you're just, like, for fuck's sake, now there's this guy, he's in my face, he's just going, picture, oi, Phil, take a picture. And so at times you don't want to react, but I suppose it's hard not to. So no, but I don't agree. I think to the point where he is a role model, You just have to, just not say fuck off or whatever it is. You just have to go and to say, look, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to engage this guy. Yeah, if he's up in my face, yeah, it's a lot more understandable, because then you've got a story across the internet that this guy's in your face. But if you're just like, piss off, you're not going to come across well, are you?
No, and I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here in terms of when I'm the stuff that I'm trying to put across is do you not think there's maybe a little sense of it's I always try and put this nicely, but when he says that stuff about his house and stuff like that, do you not think he maybe owes it a little bit to the fans that got him into the position that he's in? Yes, he works hard. All wrestlers work hard. It's the fans and it's the universe that elevate somebody to that level. And I'm not going against Punk here, but I'm just trying to look at it from another angle that he comes across like now that, he just doesn't give a shit about any element of the business. But there is some parts of the business there should still be an element respect to. Good example, and an immature example of blocking the WWE Twitter. I mean, I thought it's funny, but
what I would say on
to be like that.
That part is that, yeah, he works hard, and the fact that he's a wrestler and he made it through the independents and he come up through all the other channels that he did, that's him hard work. Him earning millions and millions of pounds or whatever he earned, that's WWE and that's the fans, because without them, he can't do that. He's not going to get that through independent shows, Exactly. So yeah, there is the bit that you have to be respectful for that, but equally, it's the CM Punk is CM Punk, and I think that's another point we said on We Talk, but previously, is that you can't distinguish the guy from real life for me. A lot of the time, because that is what Phil Brooks is CM Punk a lot of the time. Yeah. I suppose respect is a massive issue, and it's not just for the fans. It is that creative and the legends that you were talking about. You've talked about The Rock, and the way I kind of look at it, how he was booked over that 24 to 18 month period.
It was shit.
It weren't great.
In the end, it was ultimately shit. It was an amazing period of time for him, and then just a massive downward spiral.
Well, I suppose arguably before he ever became the 434 days that the first time he ever encountered legend status of what the WWE would count as a legend was Triple H, and he talked about that specifically during the podcast. Came up against Triple H. I think it might have been a SummerSlam, or it might have been the one after. If someone remembers, please let us know. And it made more sense for him. And the storyline at the time, obviously, he'd been on Revolt and he'd been slagging off the McMahon family. And I was back into watching it. And then I watched it, and Triple H beat him. And I was like, what the fuck was that? It didn't make sense to the story. And I've just thought, I'm going back thinking, well, if he's portraying this kind of Austin character, Austin wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen. Triple H would not go over. But I was like, I'll let that one slide. We get on to The Rock. Obviously, he gets asked to do the favors, and the worst thing you can get in wrestling is a promoter or a booker, in this case Vince McMahon, saying to you, I owe you one. And at this point, it might have been he owed him two. So fast forward on from The Rock, he's just done the honors, and The Rock wrestles at Elimination Chamber, Mania, gone. So there's two legends so far. We've had Triple H, who went, as he said, from retirement back into retirement and disappeared. And The Rock did something very similar after he wrestled Cena at Mania. He then got Taker, and I think CM Punk made the point of saying, well, what happens to me next? And Taker was gone the following night. And then the fourth one, I suppose, was Lesnar. And again, he made the point that we've made on this program so many times, which was, okay, you want Lesnar to go over, which he said at the time made no fucking sense, because it really didn't. And he's like, well, I'm going to be here tomorrow. Lesnar's not. What the hell? Because at this point, you've got to look, the four legends that he's encountered, every one of them's gone over potentially what is meant to be, other than John Cena, their hottest guy in the company. So I was going to say, what did you think of the booking specifically with Punk against those legends? Because I didn't get it.
No, but they were working. They'd already set those wheels in motions when they booked, certain main events like a year before. Their bad booking was way before even Punk even.
But they do change things.
They do, but they weren't going to change that. That was that main event had to happen for
which one?
Cena Rock had to happen.
Cena.
So there's things.
But as a fan, just from a fan perspective, take Punk out of this for a second. You've seen Cena Rock 1 at 28. Did you want to see it again? Title on the line or not? Did you want to see it again at 29?
Well, in the words of Stone Cold Steve Austin, oh, hell no. I didn't want to see it again. No one wanted to see it again. It was once in a lifetime. It wasn't twice in a lifetime.
And I suppose that's where he talked about Vince being a little bit out of touch maybe with what the fans wanted to see. And so they put Rock and Cena together for that one. And then it was potentially going to be Batista, who, if Guardians of the Galaxy would have came out earlier, that would have been a surefire hit against Orton. And so I think in his eyes, he's looking at a very frustrating 24 months.
It was.
Couple it in with everything else, and we'll talk about the other things still on top of the injuries and the creative. And he's thinking, I've worked my bollocks off for this company. And where am I going from here? I'm the guy that's going to be here. And we've said it time and time again. I'm actually quite surprised why I'm talking about this, because I've thought about this as knowing that we were going to talk about it this evening. And I had no idea I was going to come down on a pro-Punk stance as much as I am. And one thing I will say, just right as we are talking about this, is I don't necessarily think he's right in what he's done and how he's gone about it. But I don't think the WWE are either. So I think there's so much blame on each side, or so many things, or lack of communication, for a better phrase, of why this has gone wrong. And I think they were talking, and Vince was talking about taking ownership of your character. And I don't know. I mean, at what point do you just say, it makes no sense that Triple H is going to go over? I mean, how much of a conversation did Punk have about that? I don't take from the podcast that he ever wanted the streak from The Undertaker. I get the sense that he wanted to beat Lesnar, and that did make a lot of sense, because I'm to be honest, it's absolute bullshit that the title's not defended and hasn't been defended since Night of Champions. And the one bit of the Vince podcast I thought was absolute crap was him saying that Lesnar's a special attraction, because to be honest, if he's not in it every week, I'd rather he wasn't in it at all. I do like watching Lesnar, but for me, I want him in the program every week. And at the fact that the way they've booked these wrestlers, in these legends, I suppose, that have come in and they're doing it with Sting now, I think it's a detriment to the product, because at the end of the day, I would much rather have a CM Punk, albeit he is a bit of an arsehole, and that's his own confession at times, but I'd much rather have him that I could watch and him develop as a character, because for me it's just disappointing, I suppose, that he's felt the need so strongly about how all these issues that he's had to walk away, and because of that he's nowhere near going to get a Hall of Fame spot or anything, the recognition that he probably should got for being a fairly decent wrestler, a fairly decent talker, and basically an all-round probably top guy that the WWE had. That's what's disappointing for me.
Yeah. The Triple H thing was always going to be an issue when you got a guy that's been motioned into power, and then ultimately decides he wants to wrestle again. And the conflict of interests is massive there, and that's probably something that Punk was always gonna begrudge, that when that happened. It was just that it's a very difficult. Everyone's like, I mean, I've got a few tweets I'll read out in a few seconds, but there is quite a lot of finger pointing towards Triple H. And like I say, throughout this podcast or show that we do on a weekly basis, to me, there is no winner or loser or right or wrong. It's more about just reviewing what everyone's saying at the moment and having an opinion. And, you know, Punk, I would have been hacked off in that situation, and I would have probably thought, you know what, Triple H, that's bullshit. But then let's flip that on its head and let's look at it from Triple H's perspective. Maybe it was always on the cards that Triple H was planning a comeback, yeah? Maybe he was going to do that, right? Then the conflict of interest comes in, that he's got that element of power. The predicament's awkward for him. Now, CM Punk portrays him as an absolute tool and a doofus that doesn't know what he's doing, yeah? I don't quite think that Triple H is 100% that. I just think they just don't like each other. I just don't think they like each other, yeah, full stop. And I think that Triple H, Vince may have even been the issue here, where Vince probably said, Hunter, you got to manage him, yeah? And all issues went to Hunter. Hunter made decisions on him. Repeatedly through the podcast, Punk goes on about how he bumped heads with things with time off with Triple H.
We called it it was his Triple H voice, wasn't it? Hello, this is how Triple H talks. How you doing, Punk?
Yeah, and he repeatedly bashes Triple H through the podcast. It's almost like it's not, the biggest issue is not with Vince, it's with Triple H. Now, I would imagine, much like the way the WWE goes, is that Triple H is the fall guy for someone else who makes the ultimate decision, which is Vince McMahon. Just like the way the product works when we all have our issues, there is finger pointing at Triple H, but it has Vince's fingerprints all over what happened on the night, because it's the same old thing. So Triple H's predicament's an interesting one, because I don't really think this guy can win. Yes, he acts like God half the time, and yes, he does put himself over many, many opponents. We all know that. But I totally get why Punk was pissed at him, but then nobody's really looked at it from Triple H's angle. Was he in an awkward situation? Was he planning to come back anyway? This just added fuel to the fire for him and Punk as a bit of a spark.
Well, you never know. We might all be being worked, and we've said this on every single podcast we've done. I completely take your point with Hunter, and I felt the best way I can think to look at it is that he's called the COO on TV. I've got no idea what his official position is, or if it's anything around what he does with that. But how it feels is very much so from watching the Austin Vince podcast. Until that point, I wasn't sure how things were run still. Vince runs that show. There is no doubt in anyone's mind the key decisions all go through Vince McMahon. And like you said, I think he's been given this executive title, and CM Punk took the piss out of how he comes to work in a suit and I never used to wear a suit, you know. And for me, Hunter is in a no-win situation, because he's been given a powerful position in terms of talent and what he can do, but he can't do anything, because the key talents go straight to Vince. So it makes no difference if you've got to run things through Hunter. And yeah, Punk didn't portray him in a very good way during the podcast. And again, like we said with everything, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because there is two sides to every story, and the WWE side we are never going to get. So this is just Punk's, you know, and if Punk's going to talk about it in who's the doofus kind of son-in-law, I don't think it's worth talking about, really, to be completely honest, because you've got to have a mutual respect, and that's obvious, very, very evidently not there at the moment. Yeah,
and that's the only issue. This the only major sort of issue, and I think I covered it a few moments ago when I said about respect. And I know it must be frustrating. I've been in situations where I feel, you know, nobody shows me that sort of respect that I deserve, and it does. It grinds on you. It gets to you. You keep working hard, you keep doing what you're doing, you keep throwing yourself forward, but yet still there's someone else that puts himself over the top of you, thinking they're better than you, and you keep getting knocked back. It's frustrating. It does your head in. It makes you angry, and then you react. And you know, that's the way Punk did his. That's the way Punk was, and obviously that relationship between him and Triple H was getting thinner and thinner. And it felt like really Vince maybe is at fault for not stepping in there and just eliminating Triple H from the equation and managing that situation.
Hunter could win.
Yeah, I don't think he could. And I mean, I've got another tweet, Weeds, that I'm going to read out because we're well in the mix at the moment. And this is one, and it's quite a long one. It was meant to be one tweet, but we got three.
We get an essay.
Yeah, this is from Scott, and his Twitter is Captain Scott87, and he says the Punk podcast really highlighted how WWE operates on the our way or the highway policy. Yeah. And he goes on to say, I'm not sure what the deal about Punk being fired from a job he didn't want anyway is. However, Vince's apology is BS, because obviously Vince McMahon did apologise on the WWE network, which I don't have still. And Scott goes on to say, blaming a mix-up when his doofus son-in-law, so this was the perfect time to bring this tweet in, doofus son-in-law spoke to Punk 2 days before the wedding. So I mean that's quite a lengthy tweet, and I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you for sharing your views. And I mean, yeah, that there is that issue about the wedding, and yes, he does the doofus son-in-law. I think you can enlighten us on how truly that wasn't exactly a story. That was more him being legit of how he feels about Hunter. But we all know that by now.
No, if I'm going to say, if you ever watched the Best in the World documentary, the WWE one, he's quite he's quite cutting on Hunter in a lot of his promos around that time. Anyway, what I wanted to touch on there, and obviously that tweet helped steer us in the right direction, is actually what we've got here is the Austin versus McMahon storyline, but very much in real life and very much in the public eye. This is an employer versus an employee. And no matter where you work on this planet, and if there are people out there who say they have, they're working in the best job in the world, more power to you, because I'm going to say I've worked in jobs where I'm not happy, and the easiest thing to do is to have a go at the guy that's paying me, because at the end of the day, they are the guys that are paying me. If I get a bullshit decision, it's because of what the guys on top, the management are doing, and that, I think that is what the heart of what this is. This is Austin versus McMahon in real life. And the first thing I'll say about that is any wrestling promoter is going to butt heads with talent every day of the week, because to be a wrestler, for me, what you've got to have is a massive ego, a lot of charisma, because you've got to believe in yourself. You've got undoubtedly got to believe that you are the best in the world. And when you look at the problems Vince has had historically, you can list them, and these stars, they're arguably as big or bigger than CM Punk. He fell out with Warrior, he fell out with Austin, he fell out with Hogan countless times. The list will go on, and it can go down to the minor talents to the major talents. The WWE fall out with these talents time and time again, because at the end of the day, what you do have are your wrestlers, as I said, very, very, very headstrong, and you've got an employer who's very headstrong, but at the end of the day, he's an employer. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
So do you think that when you say Vince is very, very headstrong, do you think that he's making the decisions that he actually said in his podcast are this is so funny that he said this, that they are best for business?
At the end of the day, no matter how we look at this, and the WWE is going through arguably quite a hard time at the moment. We're trying to get the network up and the roster being a bit thin. It's been in worse situations than this and survived. And at the end of this, it's like you say, at your favourite football team or American football team, whatever it may be, that franchise is still going to be there. It's still going to run at the end of this. The WWE is not going out of business just because CM Punk isn't there. And I suppose the old adage is that a franchise is bigger than one person, and that's what this is. And yeah, CM Punk might be right on everything he's saying, and the fact that he got an apology out of whether or not it was bullshit, it's a lot more than Brett screw Brett. Do you know what I mean? And this was in a couple of days of the podcast coming out. You're not going to get much more than that from WWE to actually hold their hands up and say they're wrong. But at the end of the day, yeah, they may have to, and they may be completely wrong. But they're gonna survive. They're gonna go on. It is Punk, and yes, he said he changed how the business worked from sitting on his couch because Daniel Bryan got in the main event. However much you want to believe that's correct, and again, that's another issue completely. I'm not going to say which side of the fence I come on, but the WWE will go on regardless of Punk. And yeah, Punk may have changed it, and to some degree, he probably did. But he's at home. We're not seeing Punk, and it's the fans that are deprived of that. No matter what's going on in the WWE, and I use me and you, two of the biggest WWE marks there are, it doesn't matter who's on that show a lot of the time. We still want to go and see it. And the fact that we've booked Raw again 6 months in advance speaks volumes, doesn't it? It will go on.
Yeah, and I've got another good tweet for us, which kind of also confirms what you've just said. Is this one's from Hayden Fox, and his Twitter is WWE.
That is a really cool name. I like Hayden Fox. I'm
pretty sure I got that right. And
if his name's not Hayden Fox, he should definitely change it.
Okay. And his Twitter is WWE Town Nation. I'm sure I've got that right as well. And he goes on to say that CM Punk coming out is a huge relief, to be honest. It's been hidden for a long time. Bet Vince is worried about it, though. So, I mean, that is what I was going to say to you. Do you really think Vince is worried? Because I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure he is. I obviously understand that he apologised, but he was very adamant to say that everything that he does is for the better of the company. Everything that he does is for the fans. He listens to the fans, and we haven't really touched too much on Vince. I think our sort of idea and process was to sort of analyse Punk first and move into what Vince had to say after. But in regards to the way Austin fired questions at him, it was a really strict and actually, to be honest, I never thought we would get something quite as intense in terms of
and as open.
Yes. I mean, the way Austin did it, it felt like it wasn't a WWE product. It felt like it was more an off-the-cuff thing. It didn't feel like Austin was told, you can't ask this. Well, exactly. But it was on the WWE network, so I would have presumed that he may have been briefed before, do not ask this. But it didn't feel like that, and that was good. So I'm going back to my original point that Vince seems to see it, that he does everything for the better of the business. Vince says he's not out of touch with the industry at all, right? And everything that he does is for the right reasons and because he listens to the fans. Now, my question is if he listens so much to the fans, why did it get so bad with a CM Punk? Because I think this has been on the cards for quite some time, and many of us were pointing out, that not to treat Punk in that manner anyway. Did Vince listen to the fans? No. And then see what we've got now. And this is my thing with Vince. We're going to have a massive, massive argument later about a certain subject, me and you. So you guys are lucky because you're going to get to hear me and him talk about something that we disagreed on earlier today, and we would still disagree about now. But it's, I kind of find it a bit frustrating with Vince when he says that, because he don't. He does not listen to us.
There is only one thing he cares about at the moment, and it starts with the word WWE and ends in the word network, and that is all he cares about. This is the lifeblood of his company at the moment. I think it's very obvious, even though he says he's in the arenas, he does not listen to the fans unless they have miraculously pulled the wool over all of our eyes for about 15 months, and Daniel Bryan was, you know, always going to have that WrestleMania moment at WrestleMania 30. The fact that he was injured and out a month later makes me think that was highly doubtful. And WWE's always been a slow burn company, so they do not like instant gratification in the sense that WCW would give you something and they would throw it down your throat until you were sick of things like the NWO. The WWE, and this is where they changed recently because I think they've lost a lot of identity, they're the slow burn, so that they get the massive pop at the end of it, and that's kind of, I suppose, what we're still trying to do to some degree. But like we've said a number of times, they've lost their identity of what they're trying to do. And he talked about the competition being, you know, actual entertainment programs. No, for me, they need a wrestling program to go up against, because otherwise you haven't got talent absolutely fearing for their lives. Because the WWE, like we said, is not going anywhere at the moment. The only reason he cares about the network is because he's got investors he's accountable to, and all the other financial constraints that come with being a PLC. So other than that, yeah, and he admitted that he works these stupid, crazy days, and that you have to be on hand for your talent 24/7, 365 days a year. And if you are running a company of the size and the money that WWE makes, and you are approaching your 70s, you cannot be on hand for that talent 24/7. You just cannot physically do it.
Well, I want to give you a couple of examples of why he doesn't listen to the fans or even his own talent to put it down. Because I think that when he said this, it was like, I was just like, no. I just did not agree with this point that he made during the podcast with Austin. And the reason why I say that is because, number one, they confiscate signs from the crowd, for starters. Why do you need to do that if it's all about the WWE universe talking to you? They edit the sound on shows for no apparent reason anymore. Never used to do that during the Attitude Era. Now it's a problem. Another thing, censoring the universe. Why do you do that if you feel that you listen to us? And let's flash over to other podcasts that we've listened to, the likes of Chris Jericho when he had Batista on. Does he listen to them when they approach him and say, this is rubbish? And he goes, no, it's not rubbish. And then ultimately they will do what Vince wants, like Batista being a face, coming back to the WWE as a face, when Batista adamantly said, no, I want to be a heel. I will be a heel. They will boo me when I come out, and that is going to be a problem. Did Vince listen to that? No, he didn't. What happened? The crowd turned on him. They had to do what Batista wanted in the first place, turn him heel. That is why it is such an issue when you have Vince saying adamantly that he knows and he is in touch with the universe at the moment. Because from a business sense, probably, from a money-making side, yes, but he doesn't get it still in terms of what the fans actually want. And Austin gets it, because Austin was firing the questions because he wants a better product. And he wants it to be a wrestling product. And the line, and I'm ranting, but the line that Vince went out to say at the very start of the show, that this is not pro wrestling, it's sports entertainment, just about sums it up.
But he acts like a pro wrestling promoter, particularly, and I suppose this is the one major aspect we haven't covered on Punk yet, and probably should. and just not to just skirt over your points, but no, I get what you're saying. He is out of touch, in my opinion. We've still got Hulk Hogan being thrust down our neck every week. This is what Cena is now. It's not what the universe wants. I do like John Cena, but I don't want him. You know, he's going to be a 16-time world champion. But I hope by the time they get round to doing that, it's not some bullshit angle that he's going to win it for 16-time Royal Rumble and then Seth Rollins is going to cash in. 16-time world champion
Ric
is
Flair.
a legitimate fucking storyline where you build in someone like Ric Flair and something like that. It's not a throwaway at the Royal Rumble, which I hope is not going to happen. What I hope happens at the Royal Rumble is that Rollins just takes the belt off Lesnar himself, and Lesnar goes over Cena again, because I think if Rollins then beats Lesnar, it leaves Rollins looking absolutely brilliant, and I can't get enough of Seth Rollins. That was like kind of off on a tangent there. But I suppose where it is the wrestling promoter, what we're saying about, and as I said, it is still very much Hulk Hogan, John Cena's your number one guy, and Punk wanted to challenge that, and where he spoke time and time again, even though I think you were quite clear that he opened up the podcast, didn't he, by saying, I could have gone on other podcasts. Well, I think Colt Cabana said this. I could have been paid a lot of money for this, and this is not about money. So I suppose that's the next question I wanted to float across to you.
Yeah.
Is how much is this CM Punk money about this issue about money?
You want to float that one over to me, do you?
Yeah, I'm going to float that one.
Yeah.
Because I know you got a lot to say about it.
Well, when we talked about this earlier, and Tom Cushney mentioned it as well on Twitter, and when I picked up what Tom Cushney said as well, and I listened to the podcast a couple of times to get just to ensure. Let's just say we listened to that podcast in full. So he openly says at the beginning, it's not about pay, and he was very adamant that was pretty much set on the table from the offset. Why would you need to say that in the first place? First of all, if it's not, don't talk about it. Just don't talk about it. But he did. And then throughout the podcast, I would like somebody, if they fancy doing it, count how many times he says they should have paid me. And he keeps on repeating, pay me my money. Pay me to do this. Pay me to do that. I'm not hating on Punk for wanting what he's worth. I'm not hating on that. But when someone says it's not about pay, then why did you feel the need to talk about it for quite a lot of the podcast? And Colt Cabana never picked him up on it. And that's something that was very, for me, in comparison to both the podcasts, albeit that Stone Cold's was not about CM Punk. I thought it was very generous that he asked about CM Punk. Why couldn't Colt Cabana, maybe just because you're friends, couldn't you, ask that question? I felt Cabana sat way too back, because this was, I know it was supposed to be we're just friends, we're sitting down having a conversation. Fair enough. But, I guess he's going to get questions next week on the podcast. But I would have liked Cabana to maybe push him a little bit and said, you did mention at the start of the show it wasn't about pay, but you have actively mentioned pay a lot during the hour or 2 hours that we've just spoken for.
No, definitely. I mean, the one thing I'll go back to is that at the end of the day, and I think this comes across loud and clear, especially on how CM Punk talks, that he fell out of love with wrestling, and he talked about Jericho and how he didn't want to do that podcast because he's had nothing positive to say about wrestling at the time. And anyone who starts to view their work as solely a job and nothing more, you ask anyone if they think they're paid enough, they're going to tell you no. And if you even drop in a compliment, probably like Triple H did at the time, and said, "Oh man, that Taker match, that was a main event match," and he goes, "Well, you better fucking pay me like it's a main event match."
It became obsessed, really, isn't it?
It becomes. Yeah, I mean, money. I think you get a lot to it. And I think this is my interpretation. This is just my interpretation of what Punk is doing. He was equating a lot of money to the respect that he thought he was due from WWE. And I think rather than it being about money all the time, I think it was probably more about respect. Because at the end of the day, he said he was miserable, And even if you're paid the most in the company, you get more than John Cena, you still got to go and work in that environment. If you're not happy in the environment, the money, at the end of the day, you're always going to want more money because it doesn't change anything. You've got to be happy where you're working.
It's absolutely brilliant, though, isn't it? When we talk about this, because when you say that and you say he's thinking about respect. Respect works both ways.
Oh, he doesn't give an awful lot to people. The only person he doesn't throw under a bus, and I suppose that speaks volumes, is Vince. He's not very kind about the things he says about him. But trust me, Vince has had a lot worse said about him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't. I tweeted about this the other day, and I got quite a response back, and I did say I did think it was quite a lot to do with pay, his issues. I totally got the injuries, and I've said earlier on that I'm fully backing Punk when it comes to the injury issue. Yes, but the money bit for me is an interesting one because it's only because he says he wasn't about the money that I kind of think. But it was, and why don't you just say that it was, and I deserve this? And as you say, it does get to a stage, and it does get to a stage in any person's job when they are saying, I need respect, and respect equates to what you're worth. And I think that was the thing with Punk, is time and time again, he had other people getting paid considerably more than him in almost, similar matches or similar spots.
And he's doing more.
Yeah, he was getting less. That respect's not there. I'll again play devil's advocate. Maybe, just maybe, Vince and Triple H thought, well, you're not showing us enough respect at the moment to warrant that payment. And we don't know how Punk was behind the scenes, but I can definitely imagine he was
difficult to deal with.
Yeah, you can imagine.
Even Cabana says he's difficult to deal with.
So I mean, there is definitely I get the pay issue, but I don't. I think that the respect issue can be definitely both ways, and because it was such a clash of heads, it was such a face-off, and I can imagine Triple H half the time thinking, you don't show me any respect, so why am I going to show you respect by paying you more money? He may not get, he don't sign the checks, Triple H, I'm sure he doesn't, I'm sure it's Vince that does that, but Triple H will be feeding back to Vince, he's totally disrespectful to me again, don't give him, that's how it works. If you piss off your boss, what do you expect you're going to get back? And unfortunately, that's life, and that is the way that things happen. And maybe he's right. The best thing for him to do was to leave, to walk away, and be happy.
If he is legitimately happier now, he's not in the right environment, And the only thing I want to talk about, I suppose, and where I'm not on Punk's side,
really,
because obviously I can see his point of view, but I can see, as an employee of a big company, I can totally get it. The only thing I can't condone is the way he talks about some of the superstars, the current ones, and the things he alludes to. The Ryback stuff is out of order, in my opinion. I don't think even if he does take steroids, labelling him steroid guy, it kind of detracts from any kind of point by being funny that Punk is trying to make. It just made me think, whoa, what are you doing? He might take steroids. I don't really care. What's more interesting is the fact you injure him. He's injuring you if you think he's injuring you and doing it on purpose, and you're calling him a dumbass. You don't respect him, and I get that you're saying he's not treating you right, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think. The only thing I'd like to say about Punk, again, in a slightly negative, I suppose, fashion, is he says that he's over it and that he's done. And I get that he wanted to give fans a final outlet, but he doesn't sound like someone who's done. He sounds like someone who's not bitter per se, and he didn't want to come across as bitter. But if you're making jabs at people like Ryback, you haven't quite let it all go, in my opinion.
A little bit of immaturity by
it's Punk.
Flippant comments.
It's just Punk. It's just Punk. That's how Punk is, and I think it's intended as the start of a joke. But he was. You can't say about in my opinion, about a fellow professional.
I think it was the comment that he said about when he said as well about Ryback, where he said to Ryback, "Okay, we're gonna do this again," and it was at another event after he'd injured him previously, and he was like, "We're gonna give him the best match. We're gonna give him the best match." And I think Ryback injured him again, and he approached him in the back, and he said, "You fucking injured me again," and Ryback, and he was waiting for either you're fucking stupid or you're just not very good, and I think Ryback just said, "Oh, I apologise. It's just I just didn't. It happened," and he's like, "Well, you're just a dumbass, then." And it's really flippant the way it was. The way, I mean, that's just so.
What you got to
disrespectful.
remember is that Ryback is a new guy. He doesn't know, and you know what it's like when you're in a new role and you're not quite sure, and you're not comfortable.
It's a big spot for Ryback. Let's not get.
Yeah,
let's not
absolutely thrust into the main event with Punk, and I'm not going to start talking about CM Punk in main event because I think that's a load of bollocks. I think he's done main events with Cena the whole time, and to say that he's not a main event person is stupid. If you want my opinion, but yeah, I mean, for a guy that wanted to show an example, and there'll be times where if you've ever read Bret Hart's book, he got injured by new guys who were bigger than he was, and that's the thing. Ryback is bigger than Punk. He's noticeably bigger than Punk, and when he does stuff, it is going to hurt him at times because you just can't get away with it because of the size difference. Otherwise, it looks shit.
Yeah, and I thought that was probably something that he may regret saying that on Colt Cabana, and I think even Colt Cabana felt a little bit awkward at those points because. He was.
You don't want to burn bridges.
Yeah.
And that's potentially burning an avenue into the WWE. And again, this is an important part.
Austin said that, didn't he? Austin said that he regretted being the way he was when he left. And I mean, maybe one day Punk will do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the point I wanted to pick up on, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, and this goes to the Vince podcast, is Austin asked him, is there anyone that could bridge the gap? He goes, I had JR. And that was great. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have found a way in. And a lot of people have said, well, you've got AJ Lee working for the company. I was just wondering what your opinions are on that. I've got my opinion of it, but I was just wondering what yours was.
I don't necessarily see there's an issue of Vince reaching out to AJ Lee. We don't ever know if he actually did, but I don't really see there was an issue to ask that question of AJ Lee. I'd also say to you as well, there are other people around that area. There was Zack Ryder, another person to maybe build a bridge with. He's still, as far as I know, he's still with the company.
You got Jericho, his friend.
Yeah, Batista, another one who's apparently quite good mates with him. It sounds like he was on good terms with Orton as well. There sounded like there was a few guys.
Even Cena.
If you want,
he said he likes John.
I genuinely think there are people there that can build the gap. It's just possibly that Vince may think that this is not the time to even make the effort.
And that's it. I don't think Punk's let it go at the moment. And the way that he was in some of the podcasts tells to me that he hasn't let it all go and he won't. And Vince has done this time and time again. As I said, he's done this with potentially bigger superstars than Punk.
Rectified it with Austin, so it can be rectified. Anything
could be fixed, and it will be about money at some point and how it's going to work. And I hope we do see Punk back in a WWE ring, because once you've been there, to be completely honest, there's not an awful lot of places else to go, is there?
No. Well, we'll probably cover that when we go on to talk a little bit about Vince as well. Let's just run down a couple more tweets that we've had. These are the final ones that we've got. So we've got Callum Stevenson, and his view on the Punk situation is that he totally agrees with Punk being pissed off with the WWE, not giving him his WrestleMania main event. He deserves it. Weeds, do you want to elaborate on that one just a little bit? Agree, disagree?
No, he deserved his WrestleMania moment. But he would have had it at some point. They're guys who have been in the business longer than he was, and they've only got around to having their moment now or recently. But going around the way that he was at times is not the way you're going to get it. Yeah, you've got to be decisive on what you want. But you can't, as Punk said, you can't, and as Vince said in his thing, you can't threaten to walk out every time. You know, if you're not getting your way, you've got to find a working relationship. And at the end of the day, yeah, Punk didn't think he was respected, and I respect the fact that he walked away because he didn't. You can't just yap all day and say I'm not getting what I want. At some point you got to make a decision.
Yeah, Callum, I would mention your Twitter name, but it's pretty hard to pronounce. So we're going
to say it's really risque.
No. Yeah, thanks, Callum, for that tweet. The next one as well, we've got MathWiz97X. He goes on to say, there are two sides to every story. I think that is something that we definitely agree with. Hopefully everything can be resolved and we will see Punk in the WWE again one day. So I think we will. Weeds, what do you reckon?
No, I think we will. It makes too much sense, and there's too much of a legacy. And as I said, Vince has fallen out, not publicly as much as someone who stated this, but there wasn't always the means to state this in the way. Could you imagine the money Warrior could have made? I mean, Warrior's falling out is far more spectacular, as is Hogan's, and as is Austin's to some degree. This is just Punk, as he said, he didn't walk out on an angle. He didn't have anything going with him. They didn't have anything they really wanted to. They couldn't give him a direction. At some point he's got to direct that as well, but that was the problem. And as I say, if he didn't walk out really per se. The firing's a bit tasteless, and I kind of agree with the sense that the WWE, whoever did do that, if it was a talent person, they knew what they were doing. If it was an office, they didn't. It's my opinion. Because AJ Lee still had to go on holiday. She's not like going to go, I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks, or I'll see you. Oh, I'm getting married, by the way, because it's not a surprise. They would have known that she was going off to get married. But whether that's a talent and an office miscommunication, like Vince said, it does happen in the corporate world. It happens where I've worked, where you've had miscommunication about something. You really think, how the bloody hell has that been miscommunicated? But it does happen when you've got your eye on a lot of other things. I'm not saying that's what happened in this stage with Triple H, because I'm probably under the impression that anyone booking talent should be aware if someone's going to go off for a honeymoon and a wedding.
Yeah, well, I don't know what Triple H was thinking, but I kind of think that there could be, like you said, a bit more to that story than meets the eye, than it was just done deliberately.
There's two sides to everything.
Well, that's exactly the point that a lot of people are saying. Ryan as well, SkinnyBone16, you said two sides to every story, just as many others have. And you said, as expected, glad Vince took the high road in the response, and I hope to see Punk in the WWE again.
Definitely.
So, I mean, yeah, that's our tweets from everybody, and I think maybe this gives us the perfect opportunity to maybe talk a little bit more in depth about Vince's actual interview. And I mean, I'm going to do a bit of a Vince, because on the WWE Network, Vince kind of called the shots and said he wanted to go longer with Austin. So we're going to go a bit longer. I think we're going to give ourselves maybe 20 minutes more than we normally do. We've already been going an hour and 11 minutes, Weeds. It's madness, the amount we talk
you
about.
thought me right.
But yeah, let's talk about Vince as well. And so let's talk about the subject that I wanted to talk to you about this, because we've already argued about this once, and we'll argue about it again. We'll try and keep within the boundary of it. But Vince on the young talent. Now, there was a whole big thing about Austin questioning him. Does he know what he's doing? We've already spoke before about saying, is Vince out of touch? So we've covered that. But one name that definitely came up was Vince. Austin said he likes Cesaro. And Vince said there's something missing with Cesaro at the moment. And he doesn't. He's lacking that charisma. And Austin's point was, at the time when Cesaro was getting there, they switched up his gimmick. They paired him up with Heyman. He lost momentum there, and then ultimately he's been in that downward spiral, and he's kind of come back up and then he's dropped back down. But at the time, the WWE, there was no person really pushing Cesaro. It was just the WWE universe had picked up that he was good, and we were all backing him, and everybody wanted him to succeed. And there was even a point in the Elimination Chamber, in that build-up to that event, that he was dominating. And it was all looking good for Cesaro. And then a booking decision was made, and it went terribly wrong. And that was what Austin was pointing at, was that one decision has almost cost a superstar being made into a big deal, because he could have ultimately gone on and won the WWE Championship at that point, and you would have made a superstar just like that, yeah? The issue here is that Vince didn't do that. They changed the booking, they rotated it, it went wrong. Now, you said that you're going to tell me your opinion, I know you are, and but he says that he lacks charisma. Yes, he may not have the greatest mic skills, but he was on his way at that point in time. And that's what makes me angry about this scenario, that Vince and the bookers didn't get it. They did not get it, and they changed it completely and screwed it all up.
There's a number of points that you raised there. I would agree with Vince that he doesn't have a lot of charisma going for him at the moment, and his mic skills are low. There's a combination of things for me. One is he doesn't get a lot of opportunity to talk, and he didn't even when he was with the Real Americans. Before, he did start to get pushed, and a lot of that was on, like you say, the reaction of the WWE audience. And as we've proved recently with Mizdow, I like to think is that a lot of the time the WWE don't necessarily know what they're reacting to. I think their solution to him having a lack of charisma or mic skills, rather than giving him a mic and giving him promos, because when he did say stuff, he was all right, but it would always have to be very direct, and it was just like, I'm going to take you out, John Cena. This is me and you, Randy Orton. It was always the same kind of thing. When he had obviously the good WrestleMania with the Battle Royal and all those kind of things. And then the decision I would imagine that someone's come up with, and I think even we said this was a good decision at the time, was they paired him with Heyman to be his mouthpiece, like he had been with Lesnar. So it would work, I suppose, to somewhat in a dream scenario. But the problem is you've got Heyman spouting about the one behind the one in 21-1 all the time, and it's never going to work. So I think rather than setting up to fail, I think some of the ownership has to go with Cesaro and how he sees that character being developed. And he should say, well, this is what's got me to the WWE. This is what's worked. There's not a lot that needs to be changed. And then if you give the WWE, and you've only got to listen to a lot of the other wrestlers and what they've come in, they do want to put their own spin on things. I mean, you only look at Austin before, he was the bloody ringmaster. You look at Triple H, he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley, because they'd seen a gimmick they liked in WCW. There's so many different examples you can use where gimmicks are bad until that character takes ownership. I never would have thought that Hunter Hearst Helmsley would have turned into the game. And I think this is what the Austin was kind of challenging the roster to do, was kind of step up and say, give your opinion. If you think wearing some kind of shit singlet is not what is the best thing for your character, say so. Be adamant about it.
So do you think then, if I was Cesaro and I turn around to you and said, I want to be a Paul Heyman guy, and I want to stay with Paul Heyman, even though you're going to take him off me and put him with Brock Lesnar, don't do that. That's going to ruin everything, because everyone will think I'm a laughing stock because you've removed Paul Heyman, even though you've billed me to be a Paul Heyman guy. Why are you going to remove him from my corner? And ultimately, that was the demise. It wasn't that he was paired up with Paul Heyman. The demise was when he got removed from being a Paul Heyman guy and was left in no man's land. That's the book. But that's the
they would just see him as not a priority.
Well, I'd
they
say
would think, we've got Orton.
So if I
they would say we've got Orton over here, we've got all these other things going on, and they would just say, well, Cesaro, he's still there, he's not going anywhere. Okay. And he's not over yet. He was on his way, but nowhere near to what was enough to be over. And he will have his time, and that will be down to him. But at the moment, we've still got all these other guys like Orton. We've got Reigns coming through. We've got Ambrose. We've got Ronan, who was just turning. We've got Bray Wyatt. We've got Cena. We've got there's enough going. We've got Ziggler, who we still haven't done anything with, and that's 3 years.
But I want to grab the brass ring. I want to grab the brass ring that people have been telling, like in the podcast. He said that someone needs to grab it. So I'm telling you to keep me with Paul Heyman and let me grab the brass ring because I can do it with Paul Heyman. This is what I'm saying. If he speaks up, will he get to do that? No, he won't. Yeah. No, it will not happen.
Well, there's different ways to speak up. And the way that it's been reported that Cesaro has spoken up is not the way you speak up, if you want my opinion. And the from the dirt sheets, and again, read into it as much as you will, is that he said basically along the lines of, Cena and Orton in the cell, we're watching this shit again, or whatever it is. And to make a snide, if it is some kind of snide comment along those lines, is not going to get you anywhere. But if you go up there and say, look, I want to do this is what I see, they might say that's not the angle we want to work at the moment. I want to do this with Orton. I want to do this with Cena. But there was enough there that they could have done stuff with him. But he's got to have the right attitude. And I'm not saying he has a bad attitude or anything like that. But they've got lots of, would you say they've got lots of good wrestlers on that underneath bit where they could potentially say, we're going to push this now, we're going to do that?
I'm going to say
just look at.
I'm going to say that they have got good wrestlers. But it's so contradictory to say that to come on that show and say that guys like Cesaro don't have the charisma when when he's on the mic, he may not have that charisma. He's got that charisma when he does, for example, the 2K15 talk through that he did, where it was the reveal. He's one of the most cockiest guys going. It was very interesting because I kind of see him as a bit like RVD in the way that RVD carries his promos. RVD was very relaxed doing his promos. It's the same way as Cesaro. Okay, there's a language barrier there, but it's very similar. And Paul Heyman said about RVD that no one ever got in the WWE RVD's promos. And maybe it's the same with Cesaro, that you don't listen to him enough. But he'll never get the opportunity because, like you said, it's that same. Although if he said that, then that may have shot himself in the foot. But he's right. We don't want to see that same old shit again.
Yeah, but equally, you want a together dressing room. And if he is saying stuff like that, it's a detriment. And since apparently he said that he hasn't won on TV since and got clean beaten in 2 out of 3 falls by Ziggler. So, and that shows that they will punish you if you do. And again, but you can't have an unruly dressing room where everyone, you want it to be competitive to a certain degree, but not to the point where you're getting slagging off, because you don't want to go down a Shawn and Brett kind of route again and things like that. You want a dressing room where they're going in the right direction.
But you'll never build stars. You'll never build stars. You'll never have that person grab the brass ring if you always retain and go back to the same guys. And that's why I found it a very ridiculous thing for Vince to say that there's no talent there that wants to grab they're there, they're trying, but there's no one that can grab it because they can't grab it because they get that close, and then you stick Cena in the main event again.
I suppose then, yeah, well, there is an element of that. But I would suppose if you're Cesaro, there's only so much you can do as a promoter or a booker, and you can say, right, we're going to give you this, and this is who you're going to be, and this is your lead up with the Elimination Chamber and all this kind of stuff. The rest is on you. And what would you say Cesaro is lacking that stops him from being the next guy?
A credible run.
But it's got to have other elements that have come back to it. Because what we're getting at the moment is that Ziggler, for argument's sake, had a really strong push at Survivor Series. I don't think he's said a word really since that happened, and it just makes you wonder just how they do book it. And I'm not saying the booking's perfect, because it's not, and it's very evident from what's on TV at the moment that it's not at the standard it should be. But what I think they're trying to say is they're not going to... They give you the platform, but you've got to take it at the same time. But that platform at times may be limited. It may be a quick flash into what it is at any particular time. And you have got to knock it out of the park. And I think Cesaro did well when he came through. And if they could have maintained it, it's bad timing because you had WrestleMania around the corner.
My bugbearer with it all, with Cesaro, is they watered him down They watered him down. If you watch him on the indie scenes, he has twice the moveset that he has now. That's number one.
He doesn't work a WWE style, I suppose. It's the easiest thing to say.
Now he works hard, and he, he's had some outstanding matches. His ones with Ziggler where he lost both falls was outstanding.
Made Ryback look $1 million a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly, and then in the Battle Royal on SmackDown, I believe it was. What did they do? Should we be moving into a Cesaro-Rusev rivalry? Yes, we should. What are we moving into? We're moving into a Jack Swagger Rusev rivalry. Now, believe me, unless I'm going insane, have I not seen that before?
Very briefly. It was very good.
But
I see what you mean, but that's what I'm saying. Swagger is very similar to a Cesaro.
But it's Cesaro who they talk about as the guy. He is a guy that they...
He will have his time. He just and I think he doesn't know himself what he needs to do, and it will be something silly that he'll do at some point that will get him completely across. They got to stop flip flopping. He's either a good guy or a bad guy because he's been both a number of times in the last year.
Big Show syndrome.
Yeah, and that is big. It's the big baby syndrome. He's for me. They lack heels, and they should go full out with that at the moment, because you wouldn't need Lesnar if you could potentially build Cesaro up to what he could be, and he will. Don't get me wrong, I do think he'll be a big star.
Well, I'll leave it. I'll hold you to that. I'll leave it on that note.
Well, it's not my fault if he's not. It's on him.
I'll be honest with you. There is one final bit on that point that I will make to you, right? So obviously that was what Austin said. Locker room, he threw it out there, and Vince said the locker room needs to step up and grab the brass ring. My opinion is that just nobody is allowed to grab it, regardless.
Oh, don't get me wrong. You have to have them behind you, giving you that push, and Cesaro is not getting that at the moment for whatever reason that may be.
But the reason why I say that no one will grab it is because of the tweet that came out straight after the podcast from John Cena, which was... the Stone Cold podcast with Vince McMahon was legit. Agree with Steve Austin that it's time to step up. WWE, #WWE Network. Why does he need to tweet that? He's the one that's in the fucking way.
He's still the best.
But do you see
even
it?
If you don't like him, whatever he is, yeah, he's the benchmark. He's still Vince's guy. He's his Hogan. But he is there, and the nearest thing you've ever had to matching him since he's had this run is Punk. That is the nearest thing you've had to matching. He beat Punk once. How many other guys can say that? How many times did Punk beat him?
I just believe that every time that John Cena says something like that, it goes to prove the point that Vince's comment on that subject alone was complete and utter rubbish. Because if you're not,
there was a few that he said that were complete and utter rubbish. I completely agree.
If you're not going to let the other guys grab it, and I'm talking about the brass ring, not his bloody grapefruits. If you're not gonna let them do that, and you're gonna keep having guys like John Cena constantly do it and not take a hit for your product, it will never get any better. And that is where Punk probably comes back in with his high and mighty of the voice of the voiceless. So I mean,
we've covered a lot.
All I would say, Weeds, is there's a couple of other small points to touch on. I'll just do them very quickly. And I'll just get your quick fire answers on them. You've already gone and told me what you thought of. Actually, let's just say you got one word to maybe sum up these couple of points I want to fire at you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ready?
Hit me.
Okay, so Vince McMahon on the WWE champion, yeah? The WWE champion is a special attraction. What's your one word? What?
Bullshit.
Oh, right, okay, fine. We're going to be like that then. Okay, next one. Vince McMahon.
The WWE champion is not a special attraction. It is the reason we tune in.
Vince McMahon was asked, will Randy Savage be in the Hall of Fame? He said yes, without a doubt, but he never said when. And Austin even pressured him to say a year, and Vince couldn't do it. So my question to you is, will we see the Macho Man, Randy Savage, in the Hall of Fame in the next 3 years?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Should be in it already.
I believe he should already be in it. I cannot believe that he's not. I watched his DVD. It was amazing. And I am thoroughly disappointed that Vince I'm thoroughly disappointed that Vince doesn't even think he needs to be in it this year. And I mean, yeah, there were my two quick fires, and I mean, like I say, we're doing some overtime today. But I mean, have you got anything else to add? I mean, to sum it all up, I mean, I thank everybody for their tweets as well. I mean, everybody. We could go longer, but I think we'll wrap it up because there's just so much to talk about. It's crazy.
We're approaching CM Punk kind of Colt Cabana levels of how long we've been talking. What I would say, and what I'll come back to, and this is kind of Jerry's final thought.
Weed's final thought.
Weed's final thought is there are two sides to every story. And this is another prime example of this. And we wanted to hear Punk's side, and we got it. You are never, ever going to get WWE's side because they are a professional corporation and they are not going to reduce themselves to that level. But it does not bear them any kind of benefit of actually discussing and airing the dirty laundry in public. I think they're both at fault in terms of the WWE could have done more to help him when he was there. And again, I think he probably could have been a bit more vocal and a bit more demanding for himself when he needed time off. But so for me, I think there's fault on both sides. But I would say ultimately he's been treated the way a lot of wrestlers have previously been treated in this company, is that, yeah, it's sports entertainment. And Vince was quite quick to say it's sports entertainment, but they're still going to treat you like a pro wrestler, and that's what it is. Do I think they'll work together again at some point? Yeah, I do. Yeah,
and that was very wordy weeds, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Check me out.
I know. Yeah, I kind of agree with all of what you just said there. To be perfectly honest, I don't think there's too much more I want to add. I mean, I do hope they work together one day. I think it will happen one day. And the only other thing I'd say as well is it's just been an amazing sort of thing, really, over the past... Well, it's not just been over like this few months with this issue. In general, how a storyline, like in 2011... which came so close to the wire, everyone thought that at points it was legit, and then actually it's come around full circle, and something very similar has actually happened in real life. So
it's the same issue. It's exactly the same issue from 2011. It just never went away. It never got resolved properly. It got skirted over at the time. I think Punk kind of alluded to that. And again, this is where he probably should have stepped up and said, "This is not how I wanted it resolved." And to some degree, I've taken this contract, and he said he could walk away for any time, but he felt the obligation that he couldn't. So I think it's the same issue. Never quite got resolved.
Yeah. I mean, guys, everybody out there, I mean, thank you very much for your tweets if you've been featured today. Let us know via the comments box below your views. Absolutely. Shed loads to talk about. As I said, there are no rights. There are no wrongs. So your opinion is more than welcome. Get involved in the comments box below, and me and Weeds are definitely going to be checking out those comments and giving you some response. It has been a huge topic, and I think we've done it justice by covering it for an hour and a half nearly. So yeah, exactly. So guys, get involved. Let us know via the comments box below. Follow me and Weeds on Twitter. I believe it's Weeds_world.
That is correct.
Yeah, got it. Spot on. And at Delzinski as well. And just hit us up on the Twitter what you thought of this week's We Talk. And want your comments, want your views. It's massive. And all that's left to be said, as per usual, is Weeds. Do you want to say goodbye?
Till next week, guys. And hopefully get some of those comments from you, and we'll get some interaction going. Yeah, see you next week.
Yeah, if you do tweet me, or you want me to read any of your comments out on next week's We Talk, let us know, and we may have a brief moment at the start of next week's show just covering some of your views of the aftermath of Punk versus McMahon.
He's got another bloody podcast, hasn't he? This week?
Exactly. I mean, that could be a match for the future, couldn't it?
I don't know. I think you're going to have to prop Vince up at some point if you have to do that now.
Vince can wear his do-rag or whatever it was as well. All right, guys.
There's an image for you, isn't there?
It's a handsome image. All right, guys, we're gonna sign off now. So yeah, let us know by the comments box below. This is Delzinski and Weeds for another We Talk. See ya.